Hello, my name is Jamie Langley, and I'm in Austin, Texas. It is February 11th, 2021. I'm interviewing Ashley Valencia-Pate from Perkins, Oklahoma today for the oral history project titled COVID-19 Teach Your Poets, Writing to Bridge the Distance, which will be archived by Oklahoma State University's Oral History Research Program. So, hello, Ashley.
Hello.
Will you introduce yourself?
I'm Ashley Valencia-Pate. I am, as you said, from Perkins, or I live in Perkins, Oklahoma. I am a senior English teacher in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and a graduate student at Oklahoma State University.
And so tell me a little bit about how you became an educator.
I think that from the earliest time, I remember sitting in a kindergarten class, believe it or not, and thinking that my kindergarten teacher was named Mrs. Langley. So that when I saw your name, I just thought, oh my gosh, how funny. But I remember she would have these inflatable letters and she would tell us stories, and every letter was a character, and I fell in love with storytelling. And throughout my entire life, I knew that that's who I wanted to be. I just didn't want to work with the little people. I wanted to teach high school English. And so it was a calling, it felt like, since I was very young.
Okay. And do you mind sharing with us a little bit about your role in education now? Talk about your school context.
So Stillwater High School is in a college town. Oklahoma State University shares our town with us. We have an interesting community because we have block schedule, which allows students to take 4 classes a semester instead of 7 all year long. So I get to actually teach all of my curriculum twice in one school year. And that helps me get to grow as I investigate the content with new scholars that enter my room. We also have a lot of autonomy, and I think that that's part of the reason our students are so successful. Since we have that freedom to continue to grow and make changes to our curriculum, our students benefit from that, and we actually have an 82% college rate, which is pretty high for this area in Oklahoma. I went to school here, so I'm also a little biased. I graduated from Stillwater High School in 2010 and began teaching here in 2017, so I have a long history as a pioneer.
So how is it to teach where you went to high school?
It's really interesting sometimes because a lot of the teachers I had are still here. We kind of joke that it's one of those schools that it's either rapture or retirement. People don't really leave. It's a little hard to get into, but my principal had actually approached me about a job opening whenever I was finishing up my student teaching, and I knew I wanted to because of the environment, and block schedule was really appealing because I knew I could dig into things with students a little better than if I taught 6 50-minute classes. And the culture here is just so special. It's really indescribable how people navigate this building whenever we're not in a pandemic, and they're actually here, of course. But it's a lot of fun. My mentors from high school, or one of them, a couple of them have retired, is now my department head. So I get to continue to learn from one of my favorite teachers.
So cool. So since we are here to talk about COVID today, I want to just hear a little bit from you, how it was for you at the beginning of COVID, kind of describe how things were happening.
I remember watching the news and hearing about COVID-19 and how it was spreading. And then I felt this sense of, oh no, what's going to happen next? Because I mean, in my lifetime, I really haven't had to face this kind of event. And I mean, really, no one has, because the last one was the Spanish flu. So, and then I remember going to my principal's office right before spring break, whenever they had made the call that we were going to shut down for a little bit. And I asked him, do you think we'll be back, or what do you think is going to happen? And it was that almost paternal call where I could tell he wanted to give me an answer, but he had to look at me and say, Ash, I have no idea. And then I'll never forget when they said that we weren't going back at all and that grades were frozen, and there was no way to really connect with my students at that point, and it was really scary.
And so because I'm going to ask you, how did you respond? Either inwardly or outwardly.
I was angry. I felt a lot of anger and I felt really lost. Teaching it's like my breath. And I breathe in books, I breathe in the lessons with my students. And so not teaching, even in the summertime, between years since I started teaching, there's always been that sense of loss of I couldn't wait to get back into my classroom to fulfill my purpose. And so I was devastated. And I was really angry at the limitations that the State Department had put on us. And I was angry about the equity issues and how I couldn't reach some of my students because they didn't have the tools they needed. And it took me a while to get over that anger. But in the meantime, I tried to just put on that mask, so to speak, really early. I've written about it in something else about, we all put on this mask and we had to pretend like everything was okay and be that rock and the solid foundation for our students. But all while I felt like a fraud because I was just as lost and scared as they were.
So at about the same time that we were facing COVID, also happened to be the time that April began, and it was National Poetry Month. And I just wanted to, because you did participate in the poetry project writing, how writing poetry during the pandemic was for you.
I actually I came across the blog a long time ago whenever I was doing research about revision practices. And so I started following it and it popped up in my inbox. And I thought, well, maybe this will help a little bit of that creative outlet. And I was also navigating a master's course where I was supposed to be writing. And I felt such writer's block, probably because that anger was just it was consuming me and I was worried about my students. So when I saw that email, I thought that would be a gateway to get my feelings back and to also fulfill a writing notebook requirement for one of my courses. And it really did help kind of assuage that anger and give me an outlet to be creative and feel a little more free.
So do you have a poem from that beginning of the month you'd like to share with us today?
This one is the first one I wrote. It's called Grounded. My toes sink in red clay, bare feet against earth, face upturned and heaven's light shining. I let the current run, mind, body, soul, back into the gentle earth, 4 elements intertwining. Don't forget me, please. The balance must stay. We both have to connect. We both need each other. I ground myself and promise to do my part, to appreciate the beauty, to mourn the loss of land. Surrounded by an open field, hawks looking at rabbits, cardinals looking for worms, and I looking up, grounded.
So I love how you've tied the geography with your feelings and the things going on around you. I'm from Georgia, so I'm a red clay girl too. So as you're reading it this afternoon, how are you feeling?
It's a little, I don't think that I even realized when I wrote it that I was navigating those emotions, but I definitely feel it. I think my feelings during the pandemic definitely parallel the feeling of loss expressed in this, where that reciprocal relationship between teacher and student was so broken and disconnected that I missed that electric current that was in my classroom. And so now looking back, I think that this might have been a subconscious prayer for normalcy.
So COVID impacted our states and schools in different ways. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about how, and I don't know which had the biggest impact on you last spring, if it was the state, the school district, but just talk to us a little bit about that and policies that impacted your work as an educator.
I think that some of the policies that happened made it really difficult to show up for work. When the State Department came out and said, and I don't know how it is in other states, but in Oklahoma, they said all your grades are frozen. You cannot earn less than your previous term's grade unless you do not participate at all or make no effort to participate. Which some students, I knew it was an equity issue and they couldn't do anything. But what was crazy is when I would put reminders on Google Classroom, like, hey guys, I know it's really difficult, but I'm only giving you a few tasks a week. I think I gave them like one assignment with a video overview, really trying to hone in on writing skills in preparation for going into junior year, which was a lot more difficult. And I would get emails from parents saying things like, how dare you require them to do anything and attack me, when really I was just following the rules of my school, which said you still by state law have to have 2 grades per week. It's just if they participate, let's cut them a break and not punish them by having a lower grade than their previous term. But the malicious emails from parents, or when I would call home for students that I had not heard from, and I would worry about them because there was no contact and no activity on their Google Classroom, and then just being the recipient of the malice was really difficult. And I know people were angry. I was angry too, but it really felt like a lot of blame was shifted to teachers, like it was our decision to close schools. And this isn't the walkout. I mean, I participated in the Oklahoma walkout, but I did not make COVID-19 happen, and I did not feel prepared to be the whipping boy for COVID-19.
So what kind of issues in education do you feel like were revealed as a result of school buildings closing? You've mentioned equity.
I think that's one of the biggest ones we look at. Education will never be a one size fits all. That's why canned curriculum is less successful than allowing teachers autonomy in their classrooms. But when we ask these students to participate and they don't have the basic tools, since we're living in a digital age, it's almost a right to have those resources, or else it's not fair. We can't mail packets when we're worried about a virus that we don't know. I mean, now we know it doesn't transmit that way, but at the time, everyone was so unsure. And so the kids that didn't have access or who had to take care of younger siblings instead of doing their work, or whose parents got laid off. And so now, mom, dad, and children are all scrambling to act like that situation is the same as a student who has the resources they need was the biggest issue. And I think that there was a lot of decisions I made regarding my students that boiled down to what is fair is not always equal. And some of my kids needed more. They needed to have a phone call where they articulated their ideas and I scribed. And I think this year we did a lot better with providing hotspots to students or Chromebooks to students. But it is my fear that when this is over, people will forget that those inequities lie in education, and that scares me.
So I'm just wondering if you had written a poem that reflected some of this you'd like to share right now.
One of them is really close about, feeling like you're an outsider, feeling like you don't have the same resources. And this one is called Give Me a Beat. Give me a beat, sharp notes to wake. Give me a beat, crescendos to create. Give me a beat, a pause not too long. Give me a beat, a moment for a song. I just need to make a sound, to rise up, out, to resonate. I just need to get a little loud, to push open this gate. I just need this anger found, to hit the coda and melt away. Give me a room, acoustics with arms open. Give me a room, a voice like an explosion. Give me a room, I know I'm not broken. I just need to make a sound, to rise up, out, to resonate. I just need to get a little loud, to push open this gate. I just need this anger found, to hit the coda and melt away.
So you touched on that anger there.
Yeah, that's a lot. From a background of poverty, so I think that those inequities were things I saw of myself that I knew I wouldn't have those resources as a student, which just kind of fueled my anger, and I didn't know how to navigate that or how to, because I couldn't fix it, which just made me more curious.
So slowly the year came to an end, or quickly, or time was elusive. So would you spend a little time talking about the end of the year for your school last spring? What was that like?
I remember feeling worried about gaps as my students moved forward, but I also felt really hopeful that I guess I thought we could wish away the virus and it'd be gone before August. So as that chapter came to an end, towards the end of the semester, I think my students and I found our way back to each other a lot more than we had in the beginning. And I made them their final, because we had to have a final still, was it asked them to reflect on what they earned that semester. So what did they put in, or what did they realize about themselves? And then the other question I asked them to look at was, what was the gift? So in all of this, what was something that you walked away knowing was a gift to you from either your teachers or from your parents during this time, or even from COVID shutting everything down and making us slow down? And the responses I got from that made me realize that even though I was really angry the entire time and I felt like a failure and I felt like I wasn't reaching them, that they knew they were cared for and that they did learn. They didn't learn what was on the map at the beginning of the year.
And so how do you think these changes have had an experience or impact your teaching practice?
I think moving into August, I had peace, because by August we were now allowed to teach new curriculum, which was something we were not allowed to do before. I think I forgot to say that, but in the spring semester we were not allowed to teach new content or new skills. And by this semester, I had examined all the best practices from my professors at OSC, since it was an online class to begin with. And I tried to design my course in a similar manner, because I thought if I go into it knowing that I might not ever see them in person, then I'll be ready and I'll be prepared. And I relied kind of on my military background to adapt and overcome. And you still have the same mission. It's to educate these children and to give them strength in writing and empower them through finding their voice and giving them a little bit of an escape in literature. So I felt at peace moving into this year, knowing I could teach in a way that my teachers had showed me without even realizing that they were preparing me for a pandemic.
And then how did it impact your relationships, either with students, families, you've talked a little bit about, and your colleagues?
I think that it actually made us a lot more collaborative, because we have amazing, strong teachers who have been here for a really long time, and we were all lost. So we were all on the same page of like, hey, what's working for you? What didn't work? And having this common battle made it to where it opened this discussion and allowed us to be vulnerable with each other in ways we had not been previously. And so now in our professional learning community, our PLC meetings, we spend a lot more time strategizing together and sharing out ideas of how to make instruction online engaging. And in the past, we were all we supported each other and we knew that everyone had their own rhythm, but we had no rhythm during COVID. So I think it opened a lot of professional opportunities within our department to learn from each other and learn from each other's skill sets, that certain tech tools that I had never heard of. Now I know I can rely on one of them to help guide me on ways to engage these students.
And are there any significant takeaways that you'd want to mention
from teaching during a pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have to let go of all our plans, and it's a lot more like an intervention than it is a traditional classroom setting where we have to just constantly respond to our student needs, because in class, in a physical environment, we pick up on their body language and we pick up on their eye rolls or their sighs, and we know that, okay, we need to back off or we need to reteach here. But in a pandemic, we don't see them. Our students are not required to turn on their cameras during meetings, and they're not required to even attend the meet if they have any reason at all. So the only way that we can see if students are understanding what they're supposed to be doing is if they turn in the work. And so I think that that's why it's more of intervention teaching and in the moment reteaching, versus I can look out at my classroom and say, okay, 5 of you are staring at the ceiling. I've lost you. We need to take a break, or we need to reassess. I've also become really reliant on student surveys since the pandemic happened, where I just give them an anonymous platform on a Google form to say what's working and what's not. How can I support your learning? Try to make it anonymous so that they feel comfortable. And a lot of it has been respectful. And sometimes it's a clarity issue where I'm the only one reading my writing. So I know my voice, I know what I'm meant to say, but it might not always translate to an 18-year-old. So I think that is probably my biggest takeaway, and something that I will continue to do even when we are all back to whatever the new normal will be.
And is there anything that you would go back and change if you could, when you look back at those weeks, months?
I think if I could, I think I actually would have pushed them a little harder than I did, because at the time I was my assignments were about writing, but I don't think that, I feel like they could have handled a little more rigor. I think I put gloves on and was scared to push them too much, but I think they could have handled it, which I'm seeing now in my classroom currently. They're doing research and they're evaluating their sources and they're collecting information, and they're a lot more resilient than most adults I know during this.
That's good to hear. Any ahas or silver linings?
I found a love for action research during the pandemic, because I was interacting with my students and having to change, and it kind of broke the obsessive nature that I have to plan everything out on a scope and sequence calendar before the semester even starts, and then that's just what it is. And I think that becoming more flexible by force showed me that some of that control was just insecurity within me as a teacher, and that I should be a little more flexible, of course, while following my curriculum map, but that I didn't need to have every assignment dreamed up before I met my students, and I could tailor it to their styles so that their strengths are highlighted.
The kitty. So do you have a third poem you'd like to share now, either something that reflects some of this springtime, or?
I have, I stopped. I think that I only did the first love for about 9 days before I got tunnel vision on my master's classes. But I do have a playful poem when I found that joy again. So this is Keep This Fire Burning Steady. Sweet girl, I am standing ready. Let me examine your tribute. Keep this fire burning steady. I can smell those veggies. I sense the stickiness of the fruit. Sweet girl, I am standing ready. I think those onions are getting sweaty. Stop worrying, Googling for a substitute. Keep this fire burning steady. I must say, you are quite messy, sloshing sticky sauces. I need a wetsuit. Sweet girl, I am standing ready. I have a flame, a power I levy. The propane climbing up my root. Keep this fire burning steady. See how those flavors marry? What can my magic execute? Sweet girl, I am standing ready. Keep this fire burning steady.
That's nice. Talking to yourself, inspiring yourself.
I was talking to my stove. It was, we had the prompts, and all of the poems had beautiful prompts written by different people around the country. And this one was about an object in front of you. And I was standing at my kitchen table looking at my stove. And I thought, this stove has so much power, and it's the real center of my house. I know the hearth is the center of homes in some places, but the stove in my family background is where the house comes to life.
So nice. So we're going to move to the now and a little bit to the future. And I wanted you just to take a little time to talk about the current state of COVID in Oklahoma and with local schools. What's it like?
This year has been a whole new series of challenges and newness. Every school in the state of Oklahoma was required to offer an alternative to in-person learning, which I do think was brilliant, because then you can't learn if you don't feel safe. And we needed that option for families to feel safe. What unfortunately happened is I was assigned to an online curriculum where I had no autonomy at all. And I had about 158 students across 2 grade levels, where my only job was to grade their assignments based on a rubric that I didn't create, an assignment that I would never create. And since I am in school to become a reading specialist, watching these automated programs and looking through the language that they used and the design flaws when it came to readability, it was really frustrating. And out of that frustration grew something really beautiful. Is, again, a lot of other teachers from different content areas that I normally didn't interact with as much, because as most people know, as teachers kind of stick to our rooms in our departments on our little islands. But we started talking about, do you see these problems in the program? And they would say, oh yeah, I don't understand why we can't design it ourselves. And that became a discussion within my school district of what would it take to have our teachers have their own virtual curriculum. So last semester, students who had picked this online platform were in English and math. And then this semester, since we have the block schedule, they focused on science and history. And the flaws we identified in the fall actually led our district to allow science teachers to develop their own curriculum, because you couldn't meet the standards of AP Bio the way the program was designed. And I think that collaboration and this little cohort that became fused together by just the fury of wanting autonomy and wanting to be able to do what was best by our students has started to grow into an idea of making our own virtual academy where people could. And I don't know if it will happen, but the fact that the conversation is there and those seeds are planted makes me hopeful that that will be a path we pursue.
Good. And so what is your teaching like for you right now?
So right now, whenever, thank God for block schedule again, when the semester ended, I returned to my normal classroom, and I actually have never met my students right now. And we've been together for 5 weeks. Some of them I know because I had them when they were sophomores. And I feel really lucky for that because in these little Google meetings, they end up talking and making other people feel like there's a sense of community because they already know me. But next week, we should return to an A-B hybrid type schedule. So I'll have half my students on 2 days of the week and the other half the other 2 days. And then Friday is a virtual or a distance remediation day. And I'm really excited to finally meet them. The snow might put a wrench in that, but I've been relying on our principal came up with a playlist, an academic playlist. He's a really huge into jazz and music. And so of course it would have a musical twinge to it. But we post a playlist of everything that they'll do this week. And I remembered a few of my college professors would do that, but they would add a video overview for students who really just needed to hear someone talk it out. And that's something I think I would do even post-pandemic because it shouldn't be a secret what we're doing this week. And if we can give them a little more responsibility, if they know they have a game on Thursday, but the playlist posted on Monday, so they know how to prepare and to stay on track, I think that will be a huge advantage to our students. But I am really excited to meet my kids finally and for them not to be little circle icons on a screen.
Oh, I hear you. So a little bit about your writing life. We started with that and with April. Do you have a space for your writing life right now? And
I think that I spend so many plates that I forget to take a pause. So every once in a while, I feel like I get hit by a poem and I'll sit down and write. But growing up, I wrote song lyrics with my brother who loves to sing. And unfortunately, I'm pretty tone deaf. And so I don't have that gifting. But I found that space again through the Verse Love Project of sometimes poems say what we're afraid to say. And poetry it's like the ultimate rival of the rhetorical triangle because the poems I wrote last spring, looking back on them, now I know, my purpose was to explore that space and see if it could benefit me and to meet my writer's notebook requirement. But, now it was really therapy. So I think I've latched on to when I'm feeling frustrated or even celebrating the successes. Sometimes I'll just jot down something and the different structures were also really inspiring. So I can revisit those structures and say, okay, I'm going to take a photograph of this and write about it. And that's something that I've held on to for the days where my classroom is empty and I need a release.
so have you been involved with any of the monthly writes?
I'm a mom of 2.
Oh, wow.
And teaching new curriculum and taking 6 hours of graduate classes. So I kind of stay in my bubble right now because I've never taught this map before. And I don't have those, I'm sure with Lang, since you've been teaching it for a while, you kind of just show up and you can make magic happen. And this project, I'm still working out the kinks in. And so I spend a lot more time just reflecting on that and making notes about what I need to change for future, whether it be distance learning or if it's in person. And then I'm just tired.
So since you brought up the word future, and that was definitely where we were going, how do you feel that COVID-19 has kind of created this maybe opportunity or direction for us as literacy teachers and learning for teachers in general? And considering ideas like we've talked about equity and access, emotional well-being, teacher communities, like where do you see us coming through this and with the impact of it?
I think that by the end of all of this, we will have, unfortunately, I think teachers will leave the field or they will retire early if they were not treated with dignity or respect in their districts, or if they had a lot of struggles. But on the other side, I think where there's pain, there's growth, and we're making it through, and we're adapting, and we're overcoming all of these obstacles. I think that virtual options will become something that people want even more. It serves some of our students really well that have anxiety or have even students who just have other activities that need more of their time have this option of working at their own pace, and they're still being extremely successful. I think that it's also brought to light the equity issues about technology and hotspots, and how do we make sure that all of our students have access to those resources. And if people reflect on that, they might even backpedal and think, how much homework do I assign to students who might not have a way to do it at home? Or who may, when they go home, they go straight to work, or who may be taking care of siblings. And I think we've become more invested in our students' mental health than ever before, because we've had to, and when we don't see them in person, we can't do those checks to see, okay, how's their behavior, and we're not seeing any work completed by them. I feel like there's been a lot more home visits where administration has been reaching out to these families, whereas before, I think we kind of just skirted by as it being a discipline issue. So I think it's brought to light a lot of great things, even though it's been a horrible situation. But I do imagine most school districts will have some kind of virtual option from now into the future. I think our primary educators that have had to navigate assessing students in distance learning are going to be, the next Fountainess and Pinnell and change the world of assessment. But the teacher community also seems a lot stronger than it was before, and less like an island and more like a cohort. And I think that will benefit our students as well.
So given your experiences, what are a few of the most important issues you think that are facing teachers right now?
I think feeling like we have a voice. A lot of teachers have not been in the room when it comes to making decisions about school precautions or ways to keep everyone safe. The CDC has recommendations that most of us in public education cannot meet. And even with the AB schedule, I have one class that has 18 and I have one class that has 6. So I think teachers have spent a lot more time being vocal because it's their health at stake. But it shouldn't take a pandemic for us to be vocal about class sizes. And it shouldn't take us a pandemic to be vocal about equity issues. But those are very real and in our face every day now. And I think that for teachers, we've become bigger advocates than maybe before. Like some people who kept to themselves have been using their voice more to bring those issues to light. I also foresee a lot of changes being requested with the state of our buildings and how education funding is funneled into different areas, because we shouldn't be worried about how the ventilation isn't going to circulate air out, and we shouldn't have those fears. But I think one of two things will happen is either the public will realize how important education is as the backbone of society, and not only literacy in the sense that you cannot function in the world without it, but also that parents rely on school for childcare, or I am not a scientist. I am an English teacher. So if I had older children right now, I could not teach them chemistry. I'm lucky that I have a 5 and a 6-year-old. But I hope that there will be more appreciation. My fear is that right now the current is the trend is running towards teachers are the bad guys. Teachers are the ones keeping our kids out of school, and we're becoming the face of the pandemic instead of being seen as an ally against the pandemic. And so my hope is that they'll start realizing we are their ally, that we do want the best for their children. But it's nerve-wracking a little bit.
So I'm just trying to think. There are a few other things I would ask about education, but are there things you've had to figure out on your own that you haven't mentioned this afternoon?
I think I've had to figure out my shield. When we're making parent phone calls, usually we have a rule where anyone who's under 70%, you have to call home. And normally I can navigate those grades with my students and say, hey, how about you come in at lunch and bring your lunch and we'll work this out and we'll have some reteaching. And since I can't do that, I've been calling a lot more parents, and I had never saw myself as someone that would be the one to just listen to them. And I've had so many parents where I get on the phone with them and it feels like they just need to get a lot off their chest. And I'm like, I'm not licensed to tell you anything about these problems, but I hear you. And that is something that I've had to learn to instead of being like, this isn't really appropriate, to just accept that everyone feels a little lost and they all need an outlet. And if they need to vent to me about things that neither of us can control, then that's okay. And that's something that I don't dread quite as much as I used to. Something else that I think I've had to learn is, besides letting go of all the control, like I mentioned earlier, is just to remember that nothing will ever be perfect, and we're all just doing the best that we can. And like, if something goes poorly or if something I design is not as engaging as I hope, I just remember that students buy into the community we create in our classroom, and it's really hard to create that online. So that's something that I still need to learn, and something I'm still learning, is how to create that family on a computer screen of black dots.
And I think this is my last education question, but is there a strategic direction for education you would like to see?
I think that we need to give students a little more choice. Some of the students who picked virtual options, like I said earlier, are thriving and they're doing better than they were when they were in the classroom. I just think they should be designed by current teachers within that district so that we know the standards are being upheld with the same amount of rigor and relevancy as any other student who walks away with a diploma from that district. I think that it's a cop-out to buy a prepackaged program when we would have that same number of students in the classroom. I would also like to see, of course, it's a dream probably, but I'd like to see our class sizes change based off of this, for people to realize that if it wasn't for the fact that most teachers have 32 to 34 kids in a class, it wouldn't be AB. They would just be able to space out and receive more direct instruction. And I think we have to win back the community, because I don't know how it is everywhere, but when decisions are made, no matter how hard we try to make the right decision, this is really like a war where you have leaders in place and they are trying the best they can to navigate unknown territory and to strike down this enemy, and our enemy is COVID, but we need the public to support us in that endeavor and not to feel like we just don't know what we're doing because we don't care. We don't know what we're doing because it's a pandemic.
I've been here before. So we've been talking for more than 45 minutes, and I didn't want to keep you all day, but Is there something you would like to say that you haven't talked about this afternoon?
I think that we've explored what it meant to me, and I think that the outlet that Verse Love was during that time, it helped me get out of the funk that I was in, and being creative within that writing space, I was able to be a little more creative in my teaching space, because since we couldn't do new content, I just relied on expression and writing styles, and we did a lot more emulation activities, which is what Verse Love was. And I think that that is something I'm grateful for, because I hadn't done as much. I had always modeled for my students things, but I hadn't said, let's just emulate this style for the sake of trying to play with it. I feel grateful for that, for bringing back the aspect of play in writing in a time that felt so serious and dark.
Nice. Do you have another poem you'd like to share before we get out of here today?
I have one more, and this one is surrounding quarantine and the whole, how we were just kind of, all of us were stuck with our noises in our own homes. This is called From Feet to Night. Pitter patter of paws, pitter patter of feet, feet braining songs, feet braining dances, dances that move us, dances shaking the day. Day shines on a farm, day embraces the fields, fields filled with hunts, fields filled with joy, joy and kinder treasure, joy in bird watching, watching cardinals swoop, watching dogs run, run after rabbits, run after wind, wind spreading corn, wind tempting deer, deer musk and earth, deer hiding, watching, watching the corn drop, watching for red brass, brass bound respectfully, brass used humbly, humbly from afar, humbly with respect, respect the animal, respect the land, land bigger than us, land wiser and older, older and gentle, older and ornery, ornery with stickers, ornery with red clay squishing, red clay blowing dust, dust speckling walls, dust covering boys, boys who run, boys who imagine. Imagine a pirate ship, imagine stadium lights, lights of the future, lights from magic bugs, bugs that mesmerize, bugs who signal night. Night falls quietly, night brings them into the table, quietly like thunder.
Ooh. So when I read this last night, I did not know you had young children. And so with the pitter patter of little feet, I felt like that took me there. And I don't know, I guess the stadium lights to me are something we've been missing.
Yeah, so I live in the middle of 7 acres, and there's a light, a big light in my neighbor's yard that's a spotlight. So it kind of looks like a stadium light across the street. So I wish I could say it was that deep, but it's really just living out at the farm. My husband and I are not farmers, but it used to be a peach farm, and it's since been condensed down to these 7 acres. But I remember sitting out there and writing this and looking out at the land and thinking about, in all of this, to be confined during quarantine in such a peaceful place. And I remember thinking, man, Thoreau would be so happy right now that he would just be exploring where the deer feeder is and be playing in the red clay that annoys and excites me when I drive on it. And all of the things that are part of that land that became where we were by force. But my husband and I and our children didn't spend as much time in playing in the fields and running around before the pandemic, because it was always go, go, go. And that poem is really just an appreciation to that environment that a lot of people didn't have during the pandemic, didn't have the space to roam like we did.
No, I've heard that a lot. And so it's nice to hear you echo that of
Well, very blessed.
the upsides of it. So if you have nothing more to say, I'll wrap us up this afternoon, but thank you for your time.
Thank you for including me. It's always nice to talk about writing.
Definitely. And with fellow teachers.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.